Welcome everyone, it's Michael DeHaan, founder of Care to Grow, and I've got Therese O'Neill with me. How are you, Therese?
I am super well, Michael.
So Therese is a part of our Women's Empowerment series, and she's going to sort of share some stories around how she's used her voice and visibility, and I'll give you a bit of a background on Therese in a moment, but you'll certainly find her a very positive person, very energetic. I think that becomes part of your leadership, your sort of natural style. So looking forward to learning a bit more about that. But I would have met you, I'm going to say, about 3 years ago, maybe more now.
Yeah, I reckon that's right, Michael. Yes, in Melbourne.
In Melbourne, exactly. And at that time, it was quite inspiring just listening to what you were doing in the mortgage industry. So you're mentoring young people coming into the industry to setting a platform for them to be successful. And one thing that you shared with me, and it's just really resonated with me still to this day, is that your success rate in regard to them coming into the industry and staying in the industry and doing well was 80%.
Yes.
Whereas the industry standard is around that 50 to 60%.
Yes.
So,
yes. So we're a good 56%, I suppose, as far as performance goes, better than the industry average.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to sort of unpacking that a bit and
yes,
maybe sharing, because it's still fair to say that it's a male-dominated industry, that the finance broking, mortgage broking industry.
Certainly is 1 to 4.
Wow. But you as a sort of a mentor, coach, and giving that guidance, generally speaking, to the majority being male brokers that are really looking to get into that industry and do well.
That's right. Yes.
So what I thought I'd do first is just sort of get to know you a bit better. So just get to know you personally, and then we'll sort of go through what that success looked like and what your sort of skills and talents were. But what's that Therese O'Neill story?
Oh gosh. Okay. So let's not bore everybody to death.
Yeah.
So I currently live in Melbourne, and I've been mentoring and coaching for coming up to 15 years or that, Michael.
Wow.
Yeah. But originally, so a banking and finance background since the earth was flat. So when I first entered the banking industry back then, it was the year that we floated the Australian dollar.
Wow. Yeah.
Sorry, it was the year that but we didn't. So the year previously, we had floated the Australian dollar for the very first time. So before that, we had a protected currency, and then the year I entered was the year that Australia unprotected its banking system. So we opened the doors to overseas banks. So those things happened in my sort of first year in the industry. People can't believe it. And I also remember in my early days in the industry working for Bank of New Zealand, which is now through many different iterations NAB. I remember getting a first fax machine. I was a commercial analyst at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember all of us from all floors coming down to that one floor, because we only had one fax machine, and watching that fax come through on thermal paper. That was quite amazing. Before that, it was telexes.
Yes.
Yes.
That's taking me back now.
I know. And I tell this to, the millennial set that I coach, and they cannot believe it. Yeah. No mobile phones, nothing.
Yes. Yeah. So I just wanted to share, and we talked about it before, as I said, your success rate in mentoring, and the majority of the people you're mentoring were men.
Yes, yes.
So share with us a bit about, I suppose, either your style of leadership, or how do you sort of get those results where in such a male-dominated industry, being a female?
So I think very lot of credibility and a lot of experience, and that I think sort of came through fairly quickly. I think every time I had a new batch of clients, there's always one or two in a gang that try to challenge you and test you out. So, and I have got a very good sense of humor. I'm very, very resilient, and so I was able to sort of quash any of that, chest thumping.
Yes.
Quite early on in the piece.
Yeah.
I also had a lot of advocates, high hitters within the industry as well, that were a massive support. Yeah. At the end of the day, too, once you start generating success, you tend to attract like-minded people, and that certainly happened. And I also, and a lot of my foundation was built on group dynamics. So I didn't mentor brokers one-on-one.
Right.
That was certainly available if they needed that intense hand holding. It was certainly available, but by and large, it was moving and navigating a group. If people make their own discovery, so if I don't tell you that, you know what, you really need to be on social media as a broker because your audience is there, or what you're doing on social media is a bit, that's certainly fine, but you'll probably get a lot of pushback from people when you tell them that. If we're in a group dynamic, we're having a group discussion, it's actually better that somebody else, a colleague, a peer, or somebody of your own rank, is the one in the group that's ignited and inspired and passionate and supports a discussion. That was always, I think, a very good and powerful weapon of influence.
Yes. Yeah.
And that would be the same, not just with something like that, but also where we had really great and wonderful discussions around, so I suppose, some philosophies and ethics in the industries as well. So, and we would always lead every session with something newsworthy and topical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty strong. We were very rigorous, fair, and it's also very, very important that you treat, that you apply the same standards equally amongst everybody. I think as soon as you start not doing that, then respect is going to waver.
Yeah, wow. So what I'm hearing there is some skills that you bring to the table. One, you've got the confidence, but very inclusive and very fair.
Yes,
and that
absolutely.
Strong qualities where people will gravitate to it and be more prepared to tell their story or to speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to think that it's always a safe space.
Yes. Yeah. No, well done. Well done. So there's a lot of young women that, well, I believe anyway, that are into corporate or just trying to build their career, and they're not as confident. They're not necessarily using their voice and visibility. So what sort of advice or tips would you give sort of a woman in that space in regard to, I suppose, being more confident and speaking up and telling her truth, so to speak?
Yeah, it's challenging, isn't it? I think, look, I've been self-employed too for the last part of 15 years, which means I don't have to answer to, I don't have a board to consider. I don't have a boss to consider. Yeah. I do have a team to consider, and I do have people's feelings and just genuinely being a nice person. But I know that there are people there with constraints, so it doesn't enable them to be probably as free thinking as they would like to be. Yeah. Two things. So if you get emotional, that's totally okay. I would say that that's not the time to challenge, to complain, to pursue a course of action. I think not while you're emotional, it's totally acceptable. You're better off going away and sending an email to yourself. I send lots of emails to myself, and do that, because you'll construct things a little bit differently with time. Yeah. I also think it's okay. We don't need to be somebody else.
Yes.
And I was just reading today, and she's an amazing broker in Sydney, and she posted, there's a wonderful Facebook group for women in commercial finance, which has got 500 members. And one of the ladies in there was reflecting on going to her branch manager at the time saying, I'm hungry, I'm ambitious, I've got it, I want to take that next step, I want to be a business banker. And they said to her, no, you're too young, you need to have at least a couple of grey hairs. And she reflected back and said, and here I am 15 years later, a mum of 3 with my own business, absolutely killing it. And she is a massively award-winning broker, an Indian lady. So, and my response to her was like, you don't stop believing. Hey, she knew she could do it.
Yes.
And if you can't do it there, you don't sabotage your boss, you don't sabotage the organisation. Find another place where they'll allow you to thrive. But I think you need to be very clear about what you want too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that.
And why you want it, Michael.
Yes. Yeah. Very important. It's got to be aligned with what you're really after, who you are.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I thought that was some great tips there. So I really appreciate that. And I think being yourself and not trying to, a lot of the women that I interview have almost adopted a male style throughout
Yeah.
their time in corporate, and then they've gone back to truly who they are,
Yes.
their brilliant self. And as soon as that shines through, then they become great leaders, authentic
Yes.
leaders, and they lead from within. So it was great that you actually shared that. Yeah.
Yeah, so some people would look at my hair and say it's quite masculine, but then I totally love colour. Yes, yeah. You got to be yourself. Look, I don't know that I was like that in my 20s.
Yeah.
In my 20s and 30s, what gets rewarded is you have a look at what gets rewarded and you try to emulate that.
Yeah.
And that's actually not being true to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That takes courage, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And you know, Michael, I had that very thing. So in my 20s, as a commercial analyst, I was the only woman in the property development finance team.
Yeah.
In the whole of the land. So
Wow.
so I went to the gym every day and I would approach board meetings. So our board meetings were with developers, and I'm sure developers are a lot nicer today than they might have been in the 80s. But you would go into that meeting pretty ballsy.
Yeah.
Otherwise your voice wouldn't be heard.
Yeah.
So I probably was also a little bit, but that wouldn't be my natural state. That was the way that I was conditioned to play.
Yeah.
What then happened to me, Michael, and it was humiliating, is I moved from being a commercial, for whatever reason, I moved to Sydney with my practice husband. And as part of that journey, I went into the residential lending arena and into branch land, which I'd never been in before. And I had a couple of KPIs. One was to lead a team. One was to have my team balance, my tellers balance, and then also home loans was a very, very important KPI. And I was absolutely dreadful. So I had the bank had sent me to a school for 2 weeks where I learned branch operations and how to be a teller, so that I could lead the team. They assumed because I had been part of a team that put together hundreds of $1 million deals, syndicated lending, we'd argue with credit, you'd get it through if you were strong enough and bullish enough, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd come from that background to actually then deal with humans like humans was a very massive learning curve for me. So I was, within 3 months, under great debt of performance management.
Yeah.
Because I just was not hitting my KPIs.
Yeah.
And I had to really take a good, hard look at myself. And I also got one of my staff members whose star sign aligned with mine. Because where I was at Balmain, so star signs are big there. So what I did is she then had a look at me and she told me that I wasn't looking at people in the eye. I wasn't demonstrating any emotion.
Wow.
And it was just like, get through the form, get it off. You know, what's your problem?
Yeah.
So I had to, take a good look at myself. What happened was we then became one of the best performing branches in the region.
Wow.
And I got promoted to a significantly larger team. So yeah, that was a good learning thing for me. I actually learned to listen to people.
Yeah.
And to go on their journey. And while they might need a mortgage, it's about the dream that they held.
Yeah.
And that changed everything for me. I became a really much nicer person.
And it's interesting, a lot of those traits, when you're in the world of bigger lending, and so to speak, there are a lot of masculine traits in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I studied accounting.
Yeah.
So again, to that accounting thing, which is all about numbers, and does that people that sit behind it were sort of secondary. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a really strong story. And then the turnaround and leading the team because they're seeing a different you.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. Good work. And thank you for sharing. That's quite powerful.
Yeah, it's a really, I used to share that with a lot of my mentees to start with as well, because It's okay to be imperfect, as long as you're seeking out some feedback. But first of all, even with me, it was the threat of being performance managed
Yes. Yeah.
that forced me to be aware,
Yeah.
to become aware, that forced me to improve.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, Michael, that was way back when I first created the first mentoring program for the industry, which the MFAA bought. Getting back and working with that, I went right back to that time and thought, I was never taught how to relate to people
Yeah.
during the application process.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that was was a foundation of what we did, and we would role play loan interviews all the time.
Wow.
Mm.
That gives you confidence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good work. Good work.
Mm.
So a young woman listening to this and taking snippets away from it and looking to do things a little bit differently, but might want to sort of sound out what's going on in their mind, would they be able to get in contact with you and sort of get some guidance from you? I don't know whether...
Absolutely. So I do in the morning usually between about 7:30 and 9 a.m. That's when I do pro bono work.
Oh, okay.
So I do a lot of it. So there's a lot of new migrants I'm helping at the moment that want to break into this industry. There's quite a lot of people. I'm not get up in a position to help them, but what I can do is help them, excuse me, with guidance and put them on the right path. So anybody reaches out to me and contacts me, please feel I'll always come back to you and say, absolutely free to talk. Anytime this week is fine between these times.
Yeah.
It's when I'm walking my dog. So it's not interrupting my paid time.
Yeah. But again, just reaching out and being available, and that slotted time, people can look for the future and go, well, in a week's time, I can lock that in, and you're willing to help them. So thank
absolutely. You. Yeah. And I'm not an idiot, right? So the new entrant today, or the person that needs help today, is potentially and prospectively a client for me in 3 years' time.
Yes. Yeah.
And if not, it's nice to help.
Sure.
And it's nice to be thought positively of.
So thank you for being a part of the series. I've learned a lot. I knew you would do the interview the way you did it, with a lot of sort of positivity, being really positive, and sharing some really good stuff there in regard to how you led and what you learned along the journey. So I really appreciate that. I'm sure people will get something out of it. So thank you for being a part of the series.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm truly honoured. And you'll give everybody my contact details, yes?
Exactly right. Yes. Yeah.
Lovely.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Great. Good luck with the series. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. See you.
See you, Michael.